It was a night that still sends chills down my spine whenever I recall it. The kind of night you only think exists in horror movies. But sometimes reality has a way of turning into a nightmare. My parents had gone out for the evening, trusting me, a 16-year-old, to hold down the fort. At that age, I thought I was invincible. But I was about to learn just how fragile that illusion could be. As the evening descended into darkness, I tried to occupy myself with a book. The book, however, failed to distract me from the growing unease that accompanied being home alone on such a silent night. The house was creaking, settling into its usual late-night sounds, and the only source of light came from the soft glow of a lamp beside me. Around 10 p.m, I started to hear it, a subtle scratching noise emanating from the back door. At first, I brushed it off as a tree brush brushing against the house, or maybe a stray cat. But as minutes passed, the scratching grew louder, more persistent, like nails on a chalkboard. My imagination ran wild, conjuring images of something sinister lurking just outside. Curiosity mixed with dread, and I couldn't help myself. I tiptoed to the window that overlooked the dimly lit backyard, and there I saw a shadowy figure hunched over the back door. My heart raced, my breath quickened, and fear gripped me. I knew I needed to call for help, but the phone was in the kitchen, just a few feet away from the back door. The scratching continued, growing more frantic. Desperation fueled my movements as I crept through the house, my every step a silent prayer that the intruder wouldn't hear me. My trembling fingers dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice on the other end of the phone offered some comfort, but my eyes remained fixed on the backyard. The shadowy figure had become more agitated, and I could hear faint, chilling whispers, words that made no sense, but sent shivers down my spine. As the dispatcher assured me that police were on their way, the unthinkable happened. A loud crash, followed by the tinkling of glass, reached my ears. The intruder had smashed a window and was now inside the house. Panic seized me, and I had no choice but to hide in a closet, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, each moment fraught with dread. I could hear the intruder moving through the house, the sound of the footsteps echoing in the silence. My heart hammered in my chest, and I feared that any noise I made might betray my location. Finally, a distant wail of sirens pierced the night. Relief washed over me as I heard the intruder being confronted by the police. I cracked open the closet door just enough to witness the figure being led away in handcuffs, bathed in the flashing lights of the police cars. Later, the police revealed a horrifying truth. The person who had terrorized me that night was no stranger. It was someone who had been stalking our family for months, a deranged individual with an obsession that defied reason. In the aftermath of that traumatic night, my parents and I made the agonizing decision to move to a new house, hoping to escape the darkness that had enveloped us. But even in our new home, the scars of that night refused to fade. I can't help but feel a shiver down my spine every time I'm home alone at night, knowing that the terror of that night may never truly be gone. And I often wonder what would have happened if the police hadn't arrived in time, if that sinister figure had gone to me before help came. It was a night that began with excitement and laughter, one that would forever be etched in our memories as a night of terror we could never forget. My parents had left for the weekend, entrusting me, a high school teenager, with the responsibility of looking after our home. As soon as they drove off, I knew it was the perfect opportunity for a party. The house was soon filled with friends, music, and high energy. We danced, we laughed, and we made memories that will stick with me for a lifetime. But as the clock neared midnight and the party began to wind down, an eerie silence settled over the house, punctuated only by the soft snores of those who had decided to spend the night. As I navigated the dimly lit house, Turning off the music and tidying up, I began to hear something unusual, something that sent a chill down my spine. It was a strange noise, like whispers carried by the wind. I dismissed it as exhaustion, attributing it to the remnants of the party. But then, as I passed by the living room window, I saw them. Figures standing in the shadows of our front yard, their faces obscured by darkness. Panic gripped me as I realized they weren't just passers-by or curious neighbors. They were sinister, menacing, and they were here for a reason. I called out to my friends, waking them from their slumber, and together we gathered at the window, staring out into the night. The figures had multiplied, and they were moving closer, their features still hidden, but their intentions unmistakable. Fear washed over us, and we quickly locked all the doors and windows, our hearts pounding. From the safety of our barricaded home, we watched in horror as the figures outside began to taunt us. They pounded on the doors and windows, their laughter echoing through the night. It was a nightmare symphony, and there was nowhere to hide. The terror escalated as they started chanting, words that sent shivers down our spines and chilled us to the bone. Panic set in as we realized that we were trapped, surrounded by an unseen threat that seemed to be closing in. With trembling hands, I dialed 911, desperately relaying our situation to the operator. Police promised to arrive as soon as possible, but each second that passed felt like an eternity. My friends and I huddled together, paralyzed with fear, our eyes fixed on the windows as the torment outside continued. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the figures vanished into the night, just moments before the police arrived. There was no trace of them, no evidence of their presence, except for our shaken and terrified faces. The police conducted a thorough search of the area, but they found nothing. No sign of the intruders, no explanation of their sinister visit. It was as though they had never been there at all. In the days that followed, my parents returned, and we tried to put the horrifying events of that night behind us. But the memory of those shadowy figures and their malevolent presence lingered, a haunting reminder that sometimes the darkness that dwells outside can seep into our lives, leaving scars that may never truly heal. It was one of those quiet Friday nights where everyone seemed to be out of town or had plans. My flatmates had all left for the weekend, leaving me alone in our apartment. I wasn't one to mind solitude, so I spent the evening watching TV, the soft glow of the screen casting dancing shadows across the living room. As the hours ticked away and the night grew darker, I heard it, a soft, almost timid knock at the front door. My heart skipped a beat as I muted the TV and cautiously approached the door. I peered through the peephole, but there was no one in sight. A shiver ran down my spine as I thought it might be a prank or my imagination playing tricks on me. I opened the door and stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, my gaze scanning for any sign of movement. Nothing. Just the faint sound of distant traffic and the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. I shrugged it off, convincing myself that I was being overly paranoid. However, when I returned to the living room, I noticed something on the floor, a folded piece of paper. I picked it up, unfolded it, and my heart sank. It was a note, handwritten in a chilling scrawl. "I'm always watching." I felt a shiver of dread crawl up my spine, but I brushed it off as a sick prank and tossed the note in the trash. Feeling on edge, I decided to call it a night and retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. Sleep came slowly as I lay in bed, the events of the evening playing on my mind, but eventually exhaustion won and I drifted into a restless slumber. I awoke in the early hours of the morning, my senses on high alert. There were noises, soft, cautious footsteps, echoing through the apartment. Panic gripped me as I realised I wasn't alone. Someone was in the house. I turned off the bedroom light and hid in the closet, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I held my breath, praying that whoever it was would leave. But they didn't. They began searching through the apartment, drawers opening and closing, things being moved around. Minutes that felt like hours passed, and just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, salvation arrived in the form of one of my flatmates returning home unexpectedly. I heard the front door open and their keys hit the bowl on the table. In the dim light, I saw the silhouette of the intruder as they quickly retreated, making a hasty escape through a window. My flatmate entered the apartment, puzzled by the disorder and unaware of the terrifying presence that had just invaded our home. I emerged from my hiding spot, trembling and terrified. I recounted the night's events to my flatmate, and we immediately called the police. They arrived promptly, but the intruder was long gone, leaving only a trail of anxiety and paranoia in their wake. In the aftermath, we tightened our security, we installed new locks, and tried to put the nightmarish ordeal behind us. But the memory of that chilling presence and the haunting note lingered, a constant reminder that sometimes, even in the safety of your own home, there are shadows that lurk in the darkness, waiting for their chance to strike.